Do I look excited? You ready? Welcome back to Bible Over Beer with Steve.
Randy,
Hoorah!
thanks for joining us again.
You're gonna make me drink by myself. Bible over a beer. Come on.
Ah, I forgot.
Well, I'll jump in a little bit.
Do it.
Just over Joshua. This is Joshua.
Joshua.
I want to say he's a mighty warrior, but we know it's God. But wow, bloodbath,
Yeah,
bloodbath. Take it away, or I'll take it away.
Joshua, chapter 1. We know he's been installed as a leader. Moses is dead. So it's really starting out with they're ready to cross into the land,
Yep.
finally, after all those years in
Finally.
the wilderness. So God is speaking to Joshua. Prepare the people to cross the Jordan.
Yes.
Tells them to tell the people, tells Joshua, obey the laws again and have them on your lips, in your memory, day and night, because that's what it's going to take. They got to be constantly reminding themselves, because they're not always going to be around somebody to remind them.
Yeah, and we learned that in Joshua, at least part of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's interesting too. From our last video, I posed the question about Moses being somebody who walked and talked with God. Well, right off the bat, God talks to Joshua, so that's answered. I'm not certain he's as prevalent. I know as Moses, but
Well, I guess I am curious about that too, because I don't remember reading where it said they were face to face or.
No, he doesn't give context on the talking. My guess is this: it's the tabernacle. So
Okay.
he comes down in this pillar of smoke.
Right.
Obviously, correct. Make suggestions.
But it's still.
Well, he's hearing God's voice. He's
Yeah.
he's literally talking to him. I don't. Joshua, in my opinion, isn't doing a lot of back and forth like Moses did. Not a lot of actually.
You're right.
I don't recall arguing at all. He basically. God says he does. I mean, that's been
absolutely.
Joshua though, kind of how he was picked to be the leader.
Absolutely,
after
100%.
Moses. Yep.
Yep.
So
Tells the people to be strong and courageous.
Yes.
If they do that and tell them, they will obey.
you obey God's word.
So where are we starting here?
Well, I mean, so just kind of giving an overview of the chapter of the book itself. A lot of stuff as all of them. But we did answer some questions too. There was half a tribe split and wants to stay on the east. Bring comes back into the picture. That is the Reubenites, Gadites, and half of the Manasseh tribes. They're called to action now. Okay, so we were told that in Moses.
That's right.
Or sorry, Moses, Numbers. But now they're going. What Moses told them, they're putting in action. Joshua is letting them know that the Lord said it's time for you to pay your dues.
Absolutely.
To earn your east of the Jordan.
They got to go fight.
And the women and children and livestock can stay behind, but until you've helped us conquer the land, the promised land, you're going to stay back.
Yeah, so, I mean, they definitely got a head start over the other tribes, right? They're getting to settle, or at least the women and children, and the men had a break, so everybody got to sort of settle into their homes and get things prepared before they.
Yeah, I would say that.
Go to war.
Yep, and then back to your conversation or not conversation, but your lead into preparing them. One of the things they did was send a couple spies.
That's right.
And they didn't mention the names, but.
Yeah, chapter 2.
Yep.
They're going to send a couple of spies into the land, and they specifically said especially Jericho.
Go to Jericho. Yeah.
That's going to be the first battle.
So I guess the Jericho is the most, I mean, there's an order to it. So we'll get to it, but a few of the cities are named and really the stories are told about it. Then it kind of goes on to then these are conquered. So, I think these are the bigger cities. But yeah, it was interesting too, because I don't know if you read anything into it. These two spies went and stayed at a prostitute's house, Rahab.
Right. And it didn't really, as far as I can remember, it didn't really say how they ended up at this prostitute's house.
But it's so I don't know if it's kind of like.
I guess they were going to be gone for more than a day, right? So maybe they ended up there because they needed lodging.
Well, and it also could be because it's on the walls of Jericho.
Right.
So.
I don't know. Did they describe it as Rahab? The prostitute's name is Rahab. Did they describe it as her house? Yeah, it says stay at
stay at
Rahab's house.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. So they told him to stay there, and then she did a favor to them. She basically hid them from because somehow the king of Jericho.
People reported back to the king, yes, that we had spies in our land. The Israelites, yep.
And they knew where. So my guess is this is the brothel that most people venture to.
Yeah, an establishment of some sort,
Yeah,
I would think.
And then don't want to steal any glory, which I guess that's a bad phrase. Talking about Old Testament and God's glory, but in the glory of Randy's speak or my speak.
Sure. Well, I mean, Rahab basically said, everybody here has heard about your God and what he can do and what he's done for you. And,
Yes.
word
has gotten out.
Yes, taking over cities, wiping out all the citizens that live there. And, can you spare my family is basically what she's asking.
Well, in return for protecting them, yes.
Yeah.
So obviously they hid on the roof. She had them hide in the roof. The king's men came and said, "Hey, where are they?" She said, "Well, they left. We saw them. Maybe check the roads."
So it went that way, she said.
Exactly. They went that way, that way. But yeah, so she did head them out, and then she pleaded for their safety. Since I helped you, quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Got that one out with a cold.
She got their word.
And they were asked to tie a scarlet bow or something, a ribbon to their window to know.
Yeah.
And they would be spared when they came back for conquering. So
just said to make sure that you and your family are not on the streets. Because
Yep,
if you're on the
everybody
streets,
knows.
all bets are off, right? Because it's going to be
kind
a
of
massacre.
kind of like the Passover, right?
God is leading the way, right?
Yep.
And God is not being told about this arrangement,
Oh,
at least not at this moment. He wasn't consulted when they made this.
Well, but he
Arrangement.
I'm certain he knows, but I think it's part of the bargain. It's the deed that she has to do. If you're going to forget, then you're going to forget, and
Sure.
it's your luck. Your tough luck, tough to do.
Right. She knew what was coming. And she wanted to live, and she wanted her family to
Oh yeah,
live.
which is again, it's deeper, and this is a good conversation piece. I mean, as we're learning, there's a lot of references from here going back, and then as we'll read forward in other books, we'll see references back, and it's going to give us some more explanations on that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is she making a commitment for her and her family to turn to God?
But or bigger, even I sound like I'm belittling your question, but I mean, maybe a bigger point is why he's choosing the people of your repute, kind of like Jesus walked with the sinners and the tax collectors.
Yeah.
So maybe
Not
there's some kind of
the first prostitute we've heard about in the
so
Bible,
it's
or we'll hear
interesting.
about.
Yeah, so I'm kind of we were talking a little bit too about something that apparently all these folks the circumcision's a big it's a big thing. Well, apparently all these men that are of fighting age now weren't circumcised.
Right, the people out of Egypt were circumcised, but not the
but
ones
not
that were in the wilderness. And
well-
that's this whole new generation.
Yeah, and these poor folks. Speaking for guys, I mean, not that
At
I remember
that age.
yeah, being circumcised, and God is good, great.
Yeah.
He gave them time to heal before they moved on to battle.
Right.
So, and then some other cool stuff. Again, it's kind of like Exodus. The Levites carry the God told Joshua to have the Levites carry how to carry the ark in front of them, and he told the people to stay away from because
I thought that was interesting. They're warned to keep at least 2,000 cubits away. So what Steve is saying is that the ark's going to go with the priests first to cross the Jordan.
Correct.
And what happens? Whoa, the waters
just
part, just like the Red Sea.
So interesting, like parting is a way to say it, but it dammed up.
It dammed up.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, because it said it formed this massive wall.
yeah, and it flooded cities up, which I'm gathering from reading that we're going to learn about that down the road.
Oh,
But
okay.
maybe not.
Well, that's interesting.
So, yeah.
People were able to cross. I'm sure that took some time. They were warned to keep at least 2,000 cubits away from the ark. And they did use the word at least, or words at least. I'm thinking in that instance, I would want specifics. Give me a tape measure.
Well, because
I'll
they
go
have to walk past
3,000.
them. So my guess is the priests crossed the Jordan, because what happened was as soon as they stepped foot
Yeah.
in the Jordan, water stopped. It started backing up and backing up. So just like Egypt in the Exodus, the new folks are going to cross the Jordan River on dry ground.
Exactly.
But
right.
they had to do some stuff for historical purposes.
After they finished crossing,
Well,
everybody got across.
while they were crossing.
Tell me.
Tell me. Yep. So 12 people were to gather 12 stones from the middle of the river, where the priests were standing. So that's where the distance was interesting. So God obviously protected them. They can get close because they gathered
Sure.
these stones, and then
That's
when they crossed, they stacked them, which we actually that we heard about that in Numbers.
Yes, so that they took them to their camp, and I'm sure their camp was
Yeah, where they camped, Gilead or whatever it was. Right, it was where they crossed.
right, exactly right, just on the other side. They got across, and I'm sure that was a long day. It's a lot of people.
40,000 men crossed for battle.
Right.
So
So the stones were a reminder of the crossing of the Jordan on dry ground.
I got something we didn't touch on. Is the manna. The manna stopped. Chapter 5, verse 12. When they celebrated Passover, after that, the manna stopped, and they
Right.
ate from the land. So we forgot to bring this up.
Just now?
Well, no, just excuse me. In our talking, our conversations, even in Exodus, they've been
Oh yeah,
eating
yeah. This
manna
whole time they've been eating
40
manna.
years.
Yeah, and
So, go ahead.
I even asked you because it never really talked about the manna again. I was like, do you think they're still eating the?
Well, it did brief it, but it didn't.
They're in the wilderness, so what are they eating?
Exactly. Well, in the desert, really. I mean, mostly deserts.
I mean, they got to sacrifice all their livestock just about for their sins. So what are they eating?
Well, that's the interesting thing. They have to sacrifice this, and the Levites get to eat that.
Yeah,
So-
they get to eat the meat,
But we don't know. But so
All right.
they had quail. God provided quail before.
All
But
right.
this is when the manna stopped. So I felt that was pretty interesting to know that
Yeah,
finally off. No, but it's still amazing that. Another thing too. I mean, just little bits and pieces that their clothes didn't wear out. So they're wandering for 40 years and
good point.
a lot of
Yes.
stuff. Yeah. So it was that's more little signs of God's
Imagine
presence.
wandering 40 years in the same sandals and they look brand new.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Which it's kind of interesting to bring that up because it's not too far down along. We're going to talk to folks that put on
Yeah,
some
exactly.
old sandals to deceive.
Chapter 5 actually started off with all the Amorite and Canaanite kings along the coast. Now remember, they're going to be conquering a lot of territory, and all these lands have their own kings?
Yep.
That's a lot of kings.
Yeah.
All right.
And so they
They heard of the crossing, and they no longer had the courage to fight Israel, is what it said. I don't know. We'll read ahead, but that's what it said
yeah, it was interesting.
in the beginning. All right.
Yep. Well, and then the important part, obviously, with crossing the Jordan was to go, and where they went was to Jericho. So
They got wind of it.
So it was interesting in Jericho. Many stories about Jericho, and folks have been in church for a long time, or like us, or like me. I still haven't really.
Yeah.
I'm on the cover to cover journey now, but I've been in church for years. Jericho's a story told often, at least yearly, about what
Yeah.
So it's your first time with it, so I'll let you have the honors of.
Well,
going
what was
over it.
interesting about that, though, the Canaanite kings along the coast. But then as the book progressed, I really didn't see what kings they were talking about.
Well, they said they did mention the 5 kings, and they get listed them by names, but they did. I don't think so. Again,
Right.
they
I don't
go
know if
into
these are the same 5 kings, though. You know what I
I
mean?
don't think so either.
Along the coast.
Yep.
I don't know.
I don't think so either. So,
But anyways, then it goes into the circumcision and Passover, which we already talked about. Right.
and then the big key battle, the first battle that spikes everything, is Jericho.
That's right.
And it was, of course, Jericho's a walled city, and God gave Joshua explicit orders to share. They were to carry the ark. Priests were carrying the ark with the fighting men who went in front and behind them, or behind them. I think front and behind them.
There's actually a little point before that, though.
Oh,
When
see, I
Joshua
give you the honors. And
encountered a mysterious warrior on the road
I don't recall that one.
with his sword in his hand.
Oh,
He appeared to be
yes!
ready for battle. Joshua asks, and I don't know if Joshua was alone. It sounded like Joshua was alone, so I don't know how he encountered this warrior by himself. But anyways, he asks the warrior, "Are you for us or are you for them?" And this warrior was
An angel.
an angel. He was the general of God's army.
I would assume we'll learn someday, Michael. or
And he
Gabriel.
said, the angel
Michael.
replied, "Neither." Now, why did he say that?
That's a good question.
So I thought it was actually highlighted here in my notes. Are you for us or are you for them? I think what he should have said is, are you for God? or are you
Yes.
for them?
Good point. That's exactly. Me and Randy just went deep on us.
Yeah, baby. That's why I love this so much.
Yeah.
Because I love getting into that.
Yeah, that's it is crazy. I sometimes worry about getting the details out to remember to have the conversation, and then you find yourself glossing over it because when you first mentioned that, I'm like, oh,
Right. Just like how Moses with the rock, when he used that one, when he said he used that one wrong word.
oh yeah,
And I kind of thought, that's not right.
Yeah.
Because the angel replied, neither. So is this really about the Israel versus the Canaanites? No, this is God's battle. God and his army would lead the way for the Israelites to follow.
So you answered the question. So he corrected them by saying it is for God.
See, and here's a whole other question I have, and we'll do a deep dive, and I don't know if anybody has the answers to these.
Well, I know somebody does.
There's an upcoming battle that we'll talk about soon where some of the Israelites
Oh yes.
died. And that's the first time they ever mentioned, really, Israelites dying in battle. So if God's leading the way, if God's army is there, are the Israelites really fighting? Are they losing men in these battles?
Yes, they talked about it. So that's some of the glossing over. There was counts. There was body counts on the Israeli side before. So it's always a pattern.
Did
if
I
you
just
do
forget
as
from the
God,
prior books then? Okay.
well, yeah, yeah.
But again, more of a deep dive. And maybe we'll hear more down the road too. But
Well, to your well, and I'm anxious to get to that story, but we want to get to the exciting one first, which is the Jericho one, and I'll continue on, and then I'll basically the instructions were to circle the city 6 times, and you were to take a trumpet of ram's horn, and you were supposed to. Do you remember? I think I have written down, but when they were supposed to blow that, like each day?
they did not talk about that. They did talk about walking around once a day blowing the horns.
Okay, so so it's not
6
until
days.
it's not until the 7th day.
That's right.
Yeah, so on the 7th day, they're supposed to repeat that, carrying the ark around the covenant, and then when
Carrying the ark around the perimeter of the
I
city
said covenant
7 times this time, instead of 1 time. 7 times around the city. The priests are to blow the horns, and the men are to shout.
7 more times. You're exactly right.
The walls come crumbling down.
Yep. As soon as that blast and that long blast, Joshua called out like God asked him to, and they all shouted. I don't know. I thought they were going to shout that little thing they said, but it ended just said they shouted. So I don't know what they shouted, but the city walls come in, and then boom, they went in, and they did battle. Because God talks about it in here, and he kind of does a summary at the end when he's, we'll get to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, God actually gave an order to Joshua: kill everyone in the city, including livestock, but spare Rahab and her family. That was God speaking. Spare Rahab and her family,
because he helped them. Yep, so
all the treasure that's in the city belongs to the Lord. It's going to go in his.
All the cover, which is a good segue.
Going to go in his treasury, right? So you got to remember, this city was in fear. They were on lockdown. Nobody was coming out to face Israel. They followed God's plan to a T.
Yep.
In this battle,
and they won. And God mentions down the road that, to your point about the people dying, when they don't follow God's command, which we'll get to next, right, very next,
right,
is through God, you take 1,000 or 100 for every one person, right? Because He gives you the ability to do that. Right. Whether they fall before Him, we don't know. But there's life lost. So now to the second build up is
all it takes is one bad apple.
Yeah, in this case, it's chapter 7, Achan's sin.
Who is this guy, Achan?
He's one of the tribes, one of the people. He's the tribe of Judah.
And actually, I watched the video, and the guy was like, Achan. Yeah, I can't say
it's
it like that.
I can say it better with a cold.
What did Achan do?
So Achan, well, his people coveted the Lord's treasure. They took with them devoted items. They took a robe, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold. They stole from
that is
God.
Considered stealing, because it is God's.
Well, they were told not to take anything.
Right.
And this is a repeated pattern was here.
Taking anything from themselves,
It's easy for us to look at, I guess, because we're reading it as a summary level. But still, God's talking to you. Talking to your leader.
Achan, he's been around for a while. He's probably seen the things that God can do. He probably knows.
Well, at this point, everybody who left Egypt is gone, so he's the new generation. So maybe he's not as because
he hasn't seen what can happen to people though when they disobey.
And
what is he? 6 years old? He's had to have seen God's wrath at this point.
Yeah. Well, and so it's kind of interesting because God had all the tribes that were there in line up, and he called the one out, and obviously paraphrasing, it gets to Judah Achan, and their fate is now cemented. They confessed,
They did.
but as we learned even with Moses and Aaron,
Yeah.
you don't follow it, you're not
Achan
going
and
to.
his family were stoned to death.
Yep, and their livestock and all the possession, I think, was burned, and then it left the pile of rocks
As if they never existed.
in what is known as Achan's Valley today,
you
which
go.
is I thought I had that. Yep. So heaped a pile of rocks. This is Joshua 7, verse 26. Heaped a pile of rocks over him, which still remain. And then the place is named Valley of Anchor, which is anchor is trouble. So Valley of Trouble.
Interesting.
Go figure.
Wow.
Listen to God.
That's all you got to do, man. What's with the greed? Just
What?
he won't miss
They're
a few things.
so they haven't tasted. I guess well, they're in land. They're just into the land of milk and honey. To them, it's not milk and honey yet, but that's the land they're battling. So I don't know. I guess they're trying to save themselves up treasures. I mean, people are people.
Well,
that's
he was made an example of. So hopefully everybody,
Yep.
you know. So,
So
now
the
we're going
next-
to get into the next battle. This is
next
a city
big city.
called
Ai.
I like that name because I can actually say it very easily.
Yeah. I says the Irish
Again, they
and
sent a
Scottish.
couple spies out, and the spies come back, and they're like, "Oh, this one's going to be easy. There's less people than what we just fought. So I think we only need to send 2,000 to 3,000 men. We don't need to send the whole army."
Yep. What's interesting? Yes. Go ahead.
Well, it turns out that they did not consult with God on this battle.
That's it. Exactly. So back
Where
to
was,
your-
where was Joshua during this? How could
Well,
he?
so interestingly, I don't recall that he was mentioned, but I would assume that he
I don't
was.
either.
He was surely involved. He's the leader, so I'm assuming he's involved somehow. Why he didn't use God's guidance, we've learned. We're getting taught another lesson because what happens? They go in, they bring the
Nothing good.
Yeah, they take the 2,000 to 3,000 people, and interestingly enough, I noted that the
I think they mentioned 43 of them that were killed.
so I got 36.
Okay.
So who?
I guessed.
One of the two of us are right, but yeah, not very many. But
Right. They got out, but they lost the battle.
but it emboldened I, the people of I, the king of I. Look, I
yeah,
don't-
look what we did. We
yeah,
conquered
we
them
stopped
under God.
the Israel people, the people of Israel.
God was not with them.
Exactly. So
Won a battle, totally devoted, listened to everything, didn't even bother to consult.
didn't even consult.
Lost the battle.
Yep. So, and then
God gets involved this
yeah,
time.
so now Joshua comes into it. So we're gonna have to assume, and again, leave comments to us with us of what you know. But Joshua
Joshua.
is now consultant. God tells him what to do. Continue.
Exactly. Where are we?
So
Oh, God tells Joshua.
how to do this now? God, he's giving
Exactly.
him the plans because this is God's battle.
You're gonna send the whole army.
Yep.
You're gonna send the whole army. He talks about one group that's going to be in front of the city that's going to actually lure the king out, and then they're going to pretend that they're afraid and run away, so that all the king and all his men will pursue. And then there's another group behind the city that's going to sneak around and
Ambush. Yep.
ambush.
So that was interesting because he emboldened them. That's why I brought up the emboldened point. I shouldn't say he, but these folks who went in and didn't consult the Lord.
Right.
So Joshua took 5,000 men and said, "You're going to go with me. We're going to go out in front and camp so they can see us." And then the remainder, the 30,000 is the numbers I got. So we're about 5,000 short of the 40,000. So maybe some had died in the first battle. We're not really certain.
Yeah.
I'm not really certain. But yeah, just like you said, they pursued them and basically wait for my signal from Joshua, right?
Well, the king basically looked back and he saw that his city was on fire.
Yeah, because to
he
that
saw
point,
the smoke.
Joshua lifted up. Joshua was told by God to lift a javelin. He had a javelin and hold it up, and that
Okay.
motion to the ambush people from Israel, and they went in and attacked the cities, killed everything, burned everything down, and
Right.
And
that
then
got the king and his army to head back in that direction
And they
because the city was on fire.
finished them up.
Finished it.
I mean,
Killed everyone.
we're
Burned the
talking
city.
about, I mean, this is the beginning of a bloodbath. So they move on. So here's interesting. So we're getting into the sandal part I talked about. Remember they walked to the desert for 40 years with, brand new sandals, brand new
Yes.
clothes. They don't wear it out or anything because of God.
So we have
Well-
a group called the Gibeonites.
The Gibeonites deceive Israel.
Deception.
So what did they do?
Canaanite group. Well, they tricked Joshua. They were a group of people that lived. They were scared to death. They knew.
They were
what,
the next town over from
yeah.
I think.
They knew what was coming.
Oh yeah.
And they did, they did not want that, obviously, and they knew they'd be wiped out. So they put on battered clothes and old sandals, and they carried moldy bread. It looked like they had been traveling a long,
cracked,
long
dry
distance.
wineskins. Yep. And they imitated themselves as
Right.
sojourners from a long time.
Oh man, we came a long way to talk to you.
we're from, we heard how great you are. We'll be part
Yeah.
of you. And
And I think in that regard, Joshua took pity. I think he took some pity on them.
well, they reached out to a treaty, and God warned them about from the other chapters, other book and
Trickery.
chapters. Well, the trickery, but don't associate with the people in the land I'm going to give you.
Yes.
So they said they weren't from this land. So they're following what his suggestion was.
Okay, that part I didn't get. They weren't from that land.
Well,
from,
they were, but they said they weren't.
Okay, so they actually said that they weren't part
They're
of
from
that
a far away.
land.
Well, they said they're from far away. I think they said they were east of the Jordan. So
Which Israel wouldn't even have gone there anyway, if it wasn't part of the land.
correct. They weren't worried. Well, so they weren't saying
All right.
you're going to crush my city. They just say, hey, well, we want to be on your side. So
Let's make a treaty. Yes. Okay.
So then, okay, well, we'll make a treaty with you for
Sure.
whatever reason if we ever get you, and then they
Yeah, that's true. And I guess they can't totally know where Israel's going to stop their battle. You know what I mean?
Well, so the Gibeonites did know because it was the next city, but yeah, they tricked them.
Oh, yeah.
So interestingly, they find out that, well, they didn't hide it. Once they made the treaty, like, okay, we're from the next city.
yeah, it was 3 days later
Yeah.
that Joshua learned the deception. I mean, were they crossing by at this point? I think they were heading.
I think they were heading that way,
direction.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, wait,
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, I just saw you people. What's going on
That's
here?
it.
And I don't know. I mean, Joshua didn't appreciate the trickery, but because he had given his word,
yeah, they made a treaty. I mean,
made a treaty.
They were as a bond, So, but interestingly, there was ramifications to that.
yeah.
They,
Well, I mean, God commanded them to take all the land, and now they're not. They made a treaty, which they were told not to do.
and they're not going to lose their lives because of the treaty, but they're destined to be
Yeah.
water carriers and woodcutters forever for the Israel folks.
They're going to be servants.
Servants. So they get to keep their lives, I guess. It's a trade-off. Interesting.
Yeah.
But the trickery.
And they were happy with that.
They didn't get
they
destroyed.
They wanted
So,
life, right? Yeah,
exactly,
they were
so-
fine with that. They agreed.
So it's interesting too. I think God was a little tweaked. What's the word I'm even looking for? You need to save me the word.
I have no idea.
Ticked off is the word I'm looking for.
That's not a hard word.
No, it's not. Because we're getting excited talking about this in chapter 10 still. Verse 12, God made the sun stand still over Gibeon and the moon over the valley of Ajalon for a full day. So he stopped this.
Yeah.
Well,
So they're going to attack Gibeon, right? We've got 5 kings that joined forces. And again, I think these are different kings than the 5 kings that
Yes.
said they were totally afraid. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Let me
And I
know
want-
if you know.
And I want to apologize because he just talked about this deception. I've skipped ahead and passed over what you're exactly talking about.
Okay.
So sorry about that. But you're right. So these 5 other kings of
They
the
attacked-
Amorites. So these are 5 kings of the Amorites and to attack the city of Gibeon.
They knew what was coming for them, so they decided let's join forces. We'll be able to wipe them out easily.
Yeah, because do you remember they did say that Gibeon was great warriors? They were a strong city, and they just didn't even fight.
Yeah, I mean they couldn't understand why did they make this treaty. This doesn't make
So they emboldened them to go attack them. And
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. It didn't work.
Word got sent to Joshua that they needed help. Please come and help us. We made this treaty with you. Joshua led the army in an all-day march. God confused the enemy,
Yes.
and they were chased and defeated. Wiped
and,
out
and the
five.
five kings. Go ahead.
I was going to say the 5 kings fled, but the armies. I mean, can you imagine how many men that was?
A lot.
Wiped out.
I mean, this is beginning of the bloodbath.
Now Joshua asked the Lord, "Son, stand still over Gibeon," and it did. Do you know why he asked that?
I'm because I want you to correct my last statement. Yes, please. No, I
I'm just
don't.
thinking that they needed daylight to fight, right? They needed daylight to pursue.
Okay, could be.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, part of the confusion is with daylight where they're fighting, and then over there was their it was moonlight. So they had light everywhere they're fighting.
Right.
So, but interestingly enough, the 5 kings, who are I guess off the battlefield, they ended up into a
Yeah.
cave. So they
Yeah. Well, actually, with the daylight, yeah, because it went on. Because when he had asked for the daylight. He said, God also assisted by calling upon a powerful hailstorm. So they were still
yeah.
pursuing the army when this happened, and he wanted the daylight.
and that's a good point too. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't jot that down in my notes, but they said more people fell from the hailstorm
Yeah.
stones than the sword.
the sword.
So yeah, again, God's doing a lot of stuff.
God
But he
is
did
doing-
pass. He did. And what we forgot to say about the king of Jericho, because we're going to lead into the king here. He hung him on a pole, killed him, and hung him on a pole in front of the city until night took him down. They trapped the 5 kings
Yeah.
and left them there. Finished the battle. That was around.
go, yeah.
And then what happens with the 5 kings?
They take the stones out. They bring the kings out, puts them up on a pole for a day.
Kills them, puts them in a pole for
Okay.
a day. There's
Did
a
it say that he killed them?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
the pole killed him. I don't know.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that. I mean, if they just hung it on a pole for display while they're alive or not, I don't know. But if you know,
Well, so
please help us out.
yes, they then killed and placed a pole on a pole. Yeah,
Okay.
so he did say they killed him. So.
Okay. There's an interesting thing going back just a little bit.
Yeah.
When Joshua asked for the sun to be still,
Yeah.
it said in the Bible, it's the only time God listened to a human.
So au contraire.
What are we talking about here?
I say.
Something major like that? Or, because God's always listening to humans.
Well,
I know I read that, but if you have any ideas, please.
yeah,
give us a
because it's
comment.
interesting. Just because there's arguments with Joseph and Moses about him convincing God.
Yes. So here's the thing. If you've been watching Steve's latest edits with our past videos, he's doing a really great job, and he's also putting in little banners. So if I'm wrong here, he'll correct me.
well, yes. Well, if he's mistaken.
If I'm mistaken,
mistaken,
but I don't know where I
exactly.
would have gotten that from if I didn't read it. But
Well,
now I want to go in and look right now.
Yeah,
but we'll wait.
well, so I will ask you then to make sure you give me the what did you? So another thing, just put down verses. I put down the chapter and verse sometimes, so I
Yeah.
know just so I don't so I
Well,
don't have to
yeah.
edit as much. So
Well, this is in
10.
10.
Yeah, so we'll figure it out. So, all right. So remind me when I do the video editing. It's for you all.
That's right.
Pleasure. So, anyways,
Now we get into.
it's basically continued the conquer.
Yeah, I think basically God. Yeah, so we're conquering city after city after city. So we obviously can't get. We don't want to get into all of these.
Well, there's all because it doesn't
repetitive.
It doesn't get into a lot either. I
Sure.
mean, so it says the northern kings defeated more kings, a lot of kings, a lot of kings, a lot of kings.
Yeah.
But
Same
it did.
piece.
It does. So it is. This is the last kind of detailed. The northern. So he basically told them hamstring their horses and burn their chariots, leave no one alive, and then there's places. Sometimes they're destroying the whole city. Sometimes they're just destroying parts of it. So it's interesting, but they get less and less detailed of the conquer as
Yeah.
they go through. Excuse me.
Southern cities conquered, northern kings defeated. And then he gave, in chapter 12, a list of the defeated kings. And we're talking about the victories won by Moses and Joshua. So it's a list of all the kings.
All like it.
Why were there so many kings in this region?
All the regions from Egypt on.
Were they each like kings of 12 people, or?
Well, no, I think this is the promised land. So this is God picked out the cream of the crop. I mean, you're talking about all groves and stuff. That's rich soil, good, and so there's a lot of people living in that.
I mean, we're talking about the promised land, or we're talking about also kings along the way.
Yes, on the way
along
to the
the way.
promised land, which
That's
is a
right,
very,
Moses, right,
and this
you're
is
right.
a very, I'm going to assume it's a very rich route that people travel. This was the epicenter of the world at the time, I guess.
Okay.
So it was the place to be. you know. So
The other thing too is, in these victories, God would say, wipe out, destroy every man, woman, and child. Don't leave one breathing. And that kind of bothered me a little bit.
yeah,
Why the children? See, now there are some, and
It's-
this is
it's a-
this
it's
is
a deep
this,
question,
This
though.
may be controversial because I want to know, right? So I do some investigating, but when I go online, I don't know if what I'm reading is the truth, right?
yeah,
So
be
they will
careful,
say
yeah.
some people will say that it's the language is hyperbole
hyperbole. Okay.
or hyperbole. So they're exaggerating it a little bit. Like when they say conquered all, well, we know that there were still Canaanites left.
Okay, so it goes. So one of the things we did learn, and then I'll get back to what I think of that question is as they started conquering, some of the people did escape. So some of the people did reside there.
Right.
And we did know, and it was weird because it did say some escaped, and we did learn in the Moses is telling that don't intermix with people, and I'm not going to take them over all at once because the wild animals will take
Okay.
over. So, but back to your women and children, I think the lineage of these people were like Sodom and Gomorrah. They were bad people, and they worshipped false gods. They didn't follow God's his way. So God is eliminating these people to form the covenant with man that
Right.
the Jewish people are supposed to set the example for and become, which we learn are struggling with.
I mean, so when you go through the Bible and you look at the different terms that are used, that's what's confusing because he will say something like drive them out,
You know?
which to me means
Just evacuate them, get them out of there.
yeah, evacuate them, but could drive them out also mean put them to death? It's
So-
why drive some out but have to kill others? It's
And
again,
we're- and
this
we're-
is going to be part of the deep dive down the road, I
Yeah,
think.
and part of that cross-referencing too. It could take you a long time to do that. I've been doing a little bit,
Yeah.
and we'll do that more in the deep dive. But it does reference, like in this book particularly, it's the next book is Judges, I believe, and it's referencing some stuff from there where I'm going to assume we're getting some more details from that.
Sure.
So you're right, but I think it has to do with
And again,
Some
I don't
bad
think there's, I
times.
don't, we can't, there cannot be concrete answers to this. Different scholars, different people are going to have different interpretations of it.
yeah. I think we're reading the fact that he is trying to he's chosen the Jewish people, the people of Israel, for his people. He said he's picked them out of the nations, right?
Yeah.
So I still think in the big picture it leads to Christ because he knows that it doesn't work, and I'm seeing this, but again I have a little bit more advantage than you. I'm understanding the New Testament a little bit, so I'm thinking this is part of that, and that's why it's important to read the whole Bible because
See, and I was thinking about that hyperbole, right?
you know,
I mean, because then, as you get into the chapters a little bit, they do use the word kill, which I can't think of any other interpretation of kill
no.
but kill.
Well,
So-
it is translated from Hebrews and Greek.
So,
So
well, anyways,
there's some arguments on it.
Yeah,
but,
we could talk about
so
this
the point
forever.
is getting it. Yeah, well, but it's a good question because it is. We know God now is a loving God and wants us all. At that time, he still was because he's the same God. But this is our story.
and
This
when
is
when his own people sin, we know that he puts them to death
yeah,
by stoning and the
Exactly.
ground opening up and swallowing them. So I mean, obviously,
yeah. So,
yeah,
but again, I think it's for the bigger picture. He wants the covenant that was supposed to be when he
Sure.
created the Garden of Eden to
Well,
walk with us.
look at the
And-
flood that killed everybody.
But,
Moses'
but then
ark.
again, yeah. So exactly. So Moses is
joking.
ark. Randy and Moses. Well, at least he said Moses instead
Noah.
of Noah. Yeah. So the bloodbath begins. He takes over and takes over and takes over. So 14. I'm sorry. Yeah, the list of kings we left off, and then land still to be taken. So chapter 13, he kind of tells Joshua, "You're getting old, but there's still land to be taken." He talks about there's going to be the division of the east. We've heard about the three clans that, and then two of the full clans and one half of the Manasseh clan that have east of the Jordan. And then at this point, so basically after I guess I misspoke a little bit. So after 12, they've conquered it, right? All the big parts.
Yeah. So this is confusion.
Yeah.
God says to Joshua in chapter 13, land still to be taken. You are very old and still have large areas of land to be taken. And God lists them. But then it goes on to division of the land of east of Jordan, and then divisions of all the land to the rest
What?
of the tribes, which would be 9.5 tribes, because the one
The
tribe
what?
is divided.
Yep. The west of the west.
So what land are we talking about? Maybe
What
we'll,
this
maybe
is? Well,
we'll get
this
into
it
that
did
with
mention.
Joshua.
So it's 14 is the division of the west of the
Oh,
Jordan. So
I meant Judges. Maybe we'll get into that with Judges.
yeah, it's gonna. Well, it's gonna. I think. Well, we don't know. We haven't read it. I'm
So-
speculating it's gonna.
So
give us,
we have more land to be taken, but then he's
detail.
giving out all the land. And then it said the land, it gets towards the end where they rested from war. The land rested from war. So, okay. So we might
Yeah.
get into the next book and it'll tell us.
Well, yeah, and again, you can read through it. I think there's importance, just like the lineage, to follow and track and see where things come from. Because I'll recap on that a little bit in the back at the end of this one. But it did talk about, everybody gets a piece, and then he goes down through who gets what and where.
Sure.
And he basically everybody gets based on their size, And,
Yeah,
the Levites, and then, of course they also set up.
And they also have clans too. So we're dividing this. You have a
Oh, yeah.
tribe, but then you also have a clan.
Oh yeah, but they give the big region to
Sure.
the tribe, and then they talk about the the clan size and what they need, and then
Very detailed.
yeah, and then it was an interesting note in 14. They talk about Joseph's descendants formed two tribes. So I learned Manasseh,
Okay.
which is the split tribe from east and west, and Ephraim, which stays in the east.
So you're saying they joined forces?
No, their descendants formed two tribes. So
They have two tribes. Okay.
So Joseph's people were plenty enough that they have two tribes.
tribes.
So of the 12 tribes, 2 of them were Joseph's descendants.
Okay.
So it's interesting. They
Interesting,
noted
yeah.
it, and then they remind us that the Levites they don't have any land inheritance, but they do get towns to live in pasture land for their.
Yeah, each of the tribes have to give them, and there's a lot of Levites. So each town has to give them homes in pastures.
And they're divided up, yep. And then I want to mention Caleb too, because he was one of the ones that followed Joseph. Joseph.
Which just makes a lot of sense because they're the priests, so they will be in every community now.
Well, it's interesting because I can't argue that they aren't. But Caleb, so for circling up, Caleb was one with Joshua that followed God's command. It was an example. He gets his land. So where he walked, him and
promised
Joshua
land, right.
walked in the promised land for their spying when they're asked to in Numbers. He gets that land, so that's cool. And then
Yeah.
they also 20 goes into the cities of refuge, and I wanted to throw that in because we know about it. But
We read about that.
guess who gets to live in the cities of the refuge?
So you're talking about which tribes get to live in the cities of refuge?
Yeah, one tribe does.
I didn't write that down. I don't know.
Yeah, so the Levites. So they don't get any inheritance, but interesting enough, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So the purpose of these cities of refuge is if you accidentally kill somebody, back in those days, they want to kill you back. So
Right.
God doesn't want you to kill your own people, so they get a place to go and let people calm down. Well, what better place than to go to the priest city?
Makes sense.
So yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
intriguing.
So there was 3 of those set up.
Yep.
So yeah, it does say towns for the Levites. Okay.
Yep. Includes all. So there's more than just, but all the cities
Yeah.
of refuge did go to the Levites.
That's right. Get to chapter 22. Eastern tribes return home. These are the people that took the land east of the Jordan. The men came.
Yep.
They fought a lot of years, right? And now they finally get to return back to their land that was promised to them by Moses.
Yep. Eastern tribes fulfilled their duties and were sent home east of the Jordan. That's 22 verse 1 through 4.
That's right. Joshua met with them. He said, "You kept your promise." He blessed them and he sent them home.
And they went home with great wealth,
Yeah.
cattle, silver, gold.
So what
Clothes.
did they do when they got home, or close to
Oh.
getting home?
Well, when they crossed the Jordan, it's kind of out of the blue, kind of
Yeah.
weird because
It's
there's
actually
no.
on the
Was that on the
Israelite
west side? Was
yeah.
it on the west side? Yeah, they built an altar, which
It was confusing to
they
the,
just did all this fighting for the holy people of Israel. I think they led it a lot of it
Yeah.
because of, I think Numbers. They were going to do the forefront because they wanted to stay.
They weren't told by anybody to build an altar. They
No, they
decided
took
to
it
build
upon
an altar on themselves. So obviously Joshua and the leaders were like, "Uh-oh,
Well,
what's going on here? Are they offering sacrifices on this altar? Are they, they got it in their head
Remember,
that these
yeah, they have
bad things were happening."
They were designated where they were supposed to these
How
altars.
quickly
so-
they turned away from God is what they're thinking. So they actually prepared themselves for war.
Not the eastern tribes. This is the western tribes who there's no context here in time, but they haven't made it home yet, or so they built this altar, and so it's interesting. They built it so the rest of the tribes are like, what are they doing? We have sites to do this. They're going to worship another god.
Yeah.
This is blasphemy. Basically paraphrasing it.
So it said that they prepared for war, but they did send a delegation. They sent a delegation to speak with them.
Yep.
And it was explained that the altar is a replica. It's a reminder to the generations, a witness between us and you, so that they cannot say you have not shared in the you have no share in the Lord. So they cannot say you have no share in the Lord.
Yeah, they were fearful that because they're on the east of the Jordan, that the West people
They're
would say,
actually
well,
not
God,
in the promised land.
yeah, well, God said He divided us through the Jordan, and you're not part of our God. And they did this reminder, and they're like, oh,
A
cool.
reminder, it's a good thing. They went
Like,
home and told everybody, and they're like, yes. So the altar had a name, a witness between us, that the Lord is God.
Exactly, and that would be
Well, that's cool.
22, verse 34.
Because I was like, oh man, where's this going?
I know, like, literally, you just got done battling with your whole people, and now you're going home to rest. So. But on to 23 of 24 chapters.
Joshua, farewell to the leaders.
Yeah, he summoned the leaders.
Very similar to Moses' final speech in Deuteronomy.
Exactly. Yep.
Reminders. I'm on my way out, people.
Exactly.
So keep your promises.
Yep. And he reminds them all the stuff he's told them, like don't associate with the people, don't worship other gods, be loyal and obedient to God.
Yes, faithfulness.
And you know all the things he's seen and done.
Right.
You're successful, but when you turn your back, you're not. So 24 gets us to the what's called the covenant renewed at Shechem.
Good enough for me.
A lot of stuff there we can go on that one, and kind of in detail too. But some of the points, so he recapped in more detail to all people in Israel about the story from Egypt to there. And then he even goes back, I found really cool, because I don't remember catching this before. Abraham's father, Terah, worshipped other gods, but he someplace outside of the Euphrates, I think it was.
Okay.
But he said, I took Abram at the time, and pulled him out of that land and gave him many descendants. He gave him Isaac and Esau, and one of our points in our conversation from the prior video, so please go back and watch that. Mm-hmm. God gave Esau the hill country of Seir. So we were talking about, was he chosen? I even did some correction in my video about, yeah, of course he was chosen. So was Lot. But yeah, these are people, so those were chosen people of God, so they didn't get pushed out. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then reiterates the covenant, and I'll let you ramble some.
Joshua reaffirms the decrees and the laws, and he recorded them in the book of the laws of God. The people reaffirmed to Joshua that they will serve the Lord. Will they?
I'm reading like there's trouble coming down the road. I don't know, but the way it's worded. So
he had his final say with the people, faithfulness, life and blessings. It's so easy. Unfaithful, experience divine justice in exile. It's up to you, people. I'm out of here.
No kidding, because I'll wipe you out like that. So in 24, 25, almost the end, after he tells us all, he reaffirmed it, and he wrote the decrees and laws into the book of the law of God. And then he took a large stone as a reminder and placed it underneath the oak. I think he must have been up on a hill again, a mountain, Shechem. Was in Shechem. Right. That was served as a reminder, and it says the rock is still there. So it'd be interesting if we ever do a, promised land journey someday to take a look.
This is Joshua's time.
I'll let you give that
110 years old.
Yep.
Dies, buried in the land of his inheritance.
Yep.
And then one final note, unless you have something else, they mention at the end that close to the end, that Joseph's bones. Remember how they took Joseph's bones out of Egypt? We don't really heard much about that, but Joseph's bones were laid to rest in
his inheritance.
Shechem.
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 Okay. I'm horrible at pronouncing. I am going to add one more thing, because another guy died, another priest, Aaron's son.
Oh, okay.
So, Eliezer, Aaron's son, the priest, died and was buried in Gibeah.
I read that, but I didn't get the.
Yeah, so the last two were kind of like,
over.
by the way, they're not. I'm sorry about that. I don't mean to make light of it, but it was kind of no context. It was just there.
Sure.
So, Joshua, like I started this video, I can't give him the credit for the war, because God reminded us that they follow my rules, and I'm going to conquer this for him. But he led the most successful battles from the Israel people on.
Absolutely.
So so like I said, I'm going to jump a little bit, just talk about stuff like we're watching The Chosen, a great series. Please watch that. the disciples are wondering when the battles are going to start. Why does he pick? I think God's going to come conquer the Romans, and this is where you're
They
seeing.
think an army's coming, right?
Yeah, well, but you see it from here because they fight. So these are probably
Absolutely. That's where they got that idea from.
yeah,
You're here to drive these Romans out.
exactly. So I thought it was very good. Not a lot of accolades to Joshua like we did with Moses, but Moses had several books.
Right.
He was a very dynamic leader. He listened to God. He didn't get punished like Moses and Aaron. He just died of old age of 110. So I'm looking forward to Judges.
I have no clue about Judges. I didn't look ahead at all.
I didn't look ahead either.
It would be interesting.
So the entrance of like the Bible reading, it does give you it gave us an intro to Judges and Joshua. So I do know it's a continuation of it. So right now they're leaderless. That's a point to note.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
So maybe Judges means the judges are now going to be the leaders.
Okay.
So
Well, if you haven't read Joshua yet, please pick it up, read it. You got a week because we'll be doing Judges next Wednesday. We'll be filming Judges next Wednesday. So, with that said,
like,
subscribe.
comment, please.
We want
Until
you to join
next
us on
time,
this journey. Thank
y'all
you.
come back now. You hear?